and one.
Welcome to the BDSM in real life with Kane Wolfe. During this 2 o'clock hour, we have is it? Yeah. There's a typo on this, and it keeps trying to make me say it because it's written multiple times. So I'm having to correct it as I read it in real time. We have Kane Wolfe joining us. He will be going over the truth of BDSM and how fiction differs from reality. Crush wants to thank my show, Sex Symbol Podcast, for sponsoring today's panel. Here we go, Kane. Tell us all your
Excellent.
secrets.
Excellent. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, first off, thank you, Vita, Skylar, Sunny, everybody for setting this up and inviting me. Um, this is hopefully we'll have a bit of back and forth here. It's not intended to be a lecture series by any stretch of the imagination. I've got some slides that we'll go over, some facts, some we'll discuss a little bit about my history and how that plays into the content that I make and how all of that is at the intersection of safety, consent, BDSM, and getting it on. So I think without further ado, can we do I have control of the slides here or do I ask you to go to the next one?
You can just tell
Um,
me.
Cool. If we go to the next one, please.
It's up.
uh, I just
You
see the
should be able to
title
see it.
card.
It didn't
Really?
change.
Yeah.
It changed on my side. Oh my God. Technology.
Welcome to the future. It's amazing.
Yes. It has been.
Did
I
it
can't say
change?
it. No, honey.
Kane, do you have it? You want to share your screen?
Oh, you can change the slide yourselves.
Oh, well, damn. You want to share your screen and pull it up? Or I can.
Oh, I can go through it now. I don't know if that changed for everybody else, but if we can all just go to slide two, I think that'll be the simplest. If you
Okay.
hover your mouse over that and there's little arrows, just click two, click over, there's
Oh,
7 slides, so it'll say
gotcha.
2 of 7.
Gotcha.
And somebody just scribbled all over my page, but that's all right. So we will keep going. Who TF is Kane Wolfe? Who am I? And why is that important? I'm a BDSM practitioner, have been for about 7 years. I'm a content creator. I started on TikTok. Used to have a corporate job, got into TikTok, um, got into photography, videography, and making audio, erotic content. Um, I'm also a consent and mental health advocate, just meaning I think those two things are incredibly important, both in the BDSM community and the broader world. So those are things that I keep very close to my heart when I'm making content. They're very important things to me, as they should be to most of us. So I make audio, video, photo content, generally includes kink elements. I am a Dom. Um, I don't know that I would say 24/7, aside from the fact that it's pretty much my job. I'm not in a 24/7 dynamic or anything like that. But that is the perspective from which I make all this stuff. So the inclusion of consent details is beneficial to storytelling, leading heavily into those elements. I am of the opinion that it is incredibly hot to ask for consent, and that there are many, many, many ways to do so. Um, from whispering, suggesting, getting consent, begging is always fun. There's so many ways to go about it, and there's so much that gets represented in media that we watch, that we read, that we listen to. And I think some of those things fall by the wayside as expected, and I'll talk more about that in just a minute. We're gonna move on to slide number 3. So we'll start by talking about models of consent. We're gonna then talk about some BDSM safety protocol measures. For some of you, these may be things you've seen before. This might not be new information, and that is a-okay. There's not going to be a quiz or anything like that. Um,
Darn. We are very good students. It's ultra nerdy here.
I bet if I told you all there was going to be a quiz, that how do you see the slides? So they should be they're on that big they're on the whiteboard page. And if you hover over that, you'll see an option to click on two arrows back and forth. You can change what the slide is. Or you can draw on my slides, which seems to be pretty popular at the moment. So the Fry's model of consent, folks, is just one way that we sort of think about giving your consent to somebody for whatever it might be. It doesn't have to be sex. It could be holding a door, you know. Um, you want to that's great. We have a demand for a quiz. All right, so consent applies to so many things in our lives, and this is one model that we use to sort of assess the nature of it. Is it freely given? Um, consent cannot be given under duress, right? If I've got my my foot on your chest, you're probably not giving me your consent freely. You're pretty well being compelled to do that. Revocable is something that comes up a lot. So consent is it can always be revoked. You can always revoke your own consent. You can always say, I am no longer interested in participating in this. Um, Even if you were, I'm here, something has happened, your consent, you can always revoke your own consent. Informed consent, meaning that you know what you're getting into. And we are going to get more into that in the next slide. Enthusiastic, again, for me, this one pairs a little bit with freely given in that um, it's a little bit about mindset. It's about were we in a good place when consent was given? Personally, and this is just a personal comment. I'm I take maybes, wavering, sort of nervousness as a signal that we need to have another conversation before starting something. So I'm big on enthusiastic consent because it's always nice when both people want it, right? When we get to the part in the book when they finally let each other have it, that's always the best. We like enthusiasm, especially in this world. And then specific again, that goes with informed a little bit. Do you know exactly what you're giving your consent for? What's going to happen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all these things appear in some way, shape, or form in our literature content, in the content that I make, in the audio and things like this. And this is one way that we think about consent, the Fry's model.
I
Moving
have
on,
a question.
please.
So, where do safe words fit in? And I don't see safe words used a lot in
Hmm.
erotica. Some authors use them more than others. Some authors use, like, I always use the red, yellow, green, like the stoplight
The
method.
stoplight. Yep.
And it so how often I like, as far as the research that I've done in my very rudimentary understanding of this, like, you should always have a safe word. But, you know, people out there, they're just like, no, no, I'll know when you need to stop. And it's like, fuck that. So tell me your expert opinion on this.
Sure. I'll give you my big, giant air quotes expert opinion. To your first question, where does it fall in the Fry's model? I would say revocable.
Yeah.
Because in that moment you're saying we need to reanalyze what's going on here. If you're using the stoplight method, which is uh, green, yellow, red, yellow, green. Um, if I check in, hey, are we still at green? Everything's good to go. Or we check in, hey, we're at yellow. Maybe we need to have a conversation about something. Slow down. If it's red, for me that's a stop on play. And a lot of people don't think that safe words are very hot because they stop the action. And I can absolutely see why that would lead them to not really be included places because people think about them as something that happens when something goes wrong. And that's not exactly the case. It's also a pretty broad issue that folks almost describe like a morality to using their safe word. I think in general we need more communication that a safe word is a tool. It's not an accusation. It's not an indictment of character. Um, but I'm trying to think of how I would get that into, a realistic example of unless you had maybe a slow burn story where a safe word coming up in the narrative progress two people's relationship or something like that. They learn about each other. You could put it in there, but generally, what I make is short form, kind of getting right to the point
Yeah.
style content. And so, in that, I think a safe word. In many places, it would be considered like an interruption.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. Like when I write short stories, sometimes, I mean, I've never had anyone in a story like safe word and stop. It's more like checking in and like trying
Hmm.
to model that for people. Like you should really check in because I think maybe it's a Southern thing. People are just always worried about being polite. And I'm like, look, I'm letting you do things to my naked body. Yes, I'm going to use
Yep.
a safe word. And I mean, honestly, I want to use a safe word at work. Like, can I say red in this meeting when we stop this fucking shit right now? We talk about it. So I just think people, like you said, think it's an accusation instead of like it's a conversation starter.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Sorry to derail you.
No, no, not derail. No, that's an important conversation because I think, and we'll talk about it. I think when we get to this slide on mental health about how safe words have sort of become larger in the general zeitgeist, um, and that's not necessarily a bad thing for all the misconceptions and such. More information is usually good. All right, this is another way that we think about consent: active consent versus passive consent. Active consent, generally, you opt into individual activities or actions as they occur. So, uh, can I take your clothes off? Great. Can I touch you? Great. May I? Would you like me to? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Communication at each step. And that works well for some people, and that works um, for me for moving a narrative along. That helps with pacing sometimes, is just sort of coming up against each one of those. The people can sort of feel themselves in the story if it's an audio. Step by step, these things are happening. I'm getting permission to them. People feel more included, I think.
Right.
As far as passive consent goes, overall consent is given. Participants then opt out. And I've got a note to the side over here that I think, and Vita, I'd actually be interested to get your point of view here, that most people consider, once you start your erotica, once you start your spicy novel, you pretty well expect people to be, we're going to be getting down to business at some point. There's going to be some sex. There's going to be something hot going on.
Yeah.
Uh, and to a lot of people, I think that's just sort of a foregone conclusion. I'm picking this up. I should expect what I'm getting into. Do you have an expectation of active versus passive consent?
Hmm. That is such a good question. And it probably depends on the characters in the story.
Hmm.
Most of my short stories, uh, they're at least one of them is a brat. And so it's really the power struggle that we're seeing. And I really like if someone picks up one of my stories and it's written by Layla Bell, my pen name, people are going to fuck. And the end
Right.
goal is that people fuck. If they pick up something that's written under my real name, then it's probably a lot more academic and more about like behavior. But so I think yes, people need to know. And one of the other authors talked about this, like when people came up to her table at a, a book convention, she put on her like table runner that's like these are steamy. I think people need to know what they're getting into, especially like these days there's a lot of trigger warnings and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
So it always strikes me as funny when people read like a romance novel and then they post like a review on it and they're like, "Oh my god, people had sex in this book and I was not prepared." And I'm like, "Really?" Like you it's like wandering into a sex toy shop and being offended that you saw a cock.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think, I mean, I like to model consent in a lot of my stories because I just don't think it's done enough. And I
Hmm.
think people read erotica and then they go try to replicate it in their bedroom and they hurt themselves and or they damage themselves mentally and emotionally. Um, because they have an expectation, right?
Yeah.
And from a submissive perspective, like, yeah, it would be so fucking hot to be with a dom that could read my mind and I didn't have to say anything because if I vocalize it out loud, that means that I am actively being a slut, right? Instead of just getting it given to me. And there's a whole thing in that about human behavior, but that's not reality.
And I think it's interesting that you said that last point because I tend to think of passive consent. used in scenarios, at least when I'm making scenarios where something is happening to somebody. You know what I mean? And so that progression just sort of as a narrative element, um, we're being shown an entire progression without breaks. This whatever it may be, this process, whether it's stripping, disrobing, etc., um, presented without interruptions and maybe demonstrating somewhat of the powerlessness of a submissive if there's one in the situation, right? Here is what
Yeah,
I'm doing to you, sort of a situation.
I
Again,
just think I just think there's a lot of dynamics or a lot of power play at work there, right? So it just depends on the two people that are naked in the bedroom, right? Or the three or
absolutely.
four or however orgy, whatever.
Or how the
And
author wants to tell their story.
right. Grayson in the comments said, isn't given up control up to the safe word point, the purpose of BDSM.
That first part I would say absolutely. Yes. And up to the safe word point. But yeah, it is that lack of control. It's the allowing somebody else to act on your behalf, make decisions for you about your own well-being. IRL, we go through all the consent elements and make sure that everybody's informed and things like this. One of the other messages that the title of this was In Fact and Fiction, in sort of pointing out that while I'm going to talk about a lot of ways that we think about consent and framework safety and things like this, it's not always realistic in fiction, and that is okay. These are things that we would absolutely demand in our regular lives, and we should to keep ourselves safe and things like that. But when we are reading or witnessing or watching or whatever it may be, some of these things look a little bit different, or can at least.
I mean, and I think that definitely for me, trying to replicate shit that I write in real life, it's like real life BDSM takes so much groundwork and discussions and like you really have to do a bunch of setup, right?
Mhm.
To ensure that the scene, the dynamic, the whatever is fulfilling for both parties. And
Right.
in a book that I write, everybody's happy all the time.
Because that's the point. We don't have to see
Yeah.
the part where they're, arguing or sitting down and coming up with a list or whatever the case may be, some of the internal struggles. Um, and if that did not answer your question, GK, please let me know. I'll be happy to elaborate. And I think we will move on. Vito, did you have anything else on this one?
Oh no, sorry, honey.
No worries. All right, there's a lot of words on this. That's please don't get overwhelmed. We're going to go through it piece by piece. It's going to be a-okay. Only really one of these we're going to delve into. The rest are just provided as examples. These are some of the ways that we model or think about like safety protocol in BDSM. And we'll start with SSC. We'll go from sort of least complicated to most. And these are just general principles we think about, when you play, are you SSC? Is sometimes how that is phrased. Are you safe, sane, and consensual for folks who are reading the slide? Have precautions been taken, right? But safe, sane, and consensual is not really up to debate. Safe and sane are definitely up to debate. What I think is perfectly safe may not quite be so in another person's perspective. What I think is sane might not be to somebody else. Um, and so when I'm writing, when I'm coming up with dialogue, narratives, and things like that, this is not really one that I work around. Rack is the big one to me. Risk aware, consensual kink. Um, so is everybody involved, aware of the risk that they are undertaking? Um, and have they consented, etc. And that's where a lot of, I think, some of those really juicy details come from. Is that risk aware business? Like I said, half of the fun is getting the listener to risk aware. Do you know what I'm going to do to you? Do you know what the result of that is going to be? Let's discuss it as foreplay. Let's, you know, let's discuss it as it's going on. Let's plan out a weekend, right? And so this is one that I think a lot about when I'm doing my writing. Prick is a little bit, it takes that a step further. Personal responsibility, informed consensual kink is what that stands for. It takes rack a bit further by noting that all players are personally responsible for being informed. I should have an expectation that the people I'm playing with have also done commensurate research and things like that. As a person, I'm still going to have every single safety conversation I can think of with people before we get into an IRL situation. Um, but this is, a step forward. And then at the bottom, I note that there's SSICK. It's another framework. It seeks to combine many of these elements. The best one, IRL, is the one that keeps you safe. Um, Again, I think about this kind of stuff because it's my lifestyle when I'm writing, when I'm working. Um, and I guess I'm providing it here on the with the hope that maybe if any of you are authors or even readers, maybe you will see some of your work through this context, and that might give you a step or a branch to maybe uh delve into a little bit further. Because if you follow the framework, it kind of tells a story, and I find that that is very helpful. Occasionally, some of these letters are slightly different, etc. So if you are in a different part of the country, a different part of the world, and you practice BDSM, these might be a little bit different. The overall IRL, the overall point, right, is that we're keeping ourselves safe and informed, and that you're doing right by the people around you. When I'm writing, though, I love I love getting us to risk aware. I enjoy particularly doing audios. Let's see, when a breeding kink comes up, that's a big one. Lots of risk to be aware of there. Lots of details to describe, lots of narrative elements to combine in there. So that's sort of, I would say in a nutshell, but that was really long-winded. The intersection of how I think about writing narratives and BDSM safety protocol. I guess if we can, we'll pause here for a second if anybody has a question.
Yes, and before we take questions from the audience, I
Please.
want to give everyone the sixth scavenger hunt word of the day is vindicate. So y'all need to write that down so y'all can come back at the end and do your scavenger hunt thingy. So vindicate is the word. Oh, fourth scavenger, whatever. It's a scavenger hunt word. I'm so sorry. It's the as Skylar said, it's the fourth scavenger hunt. So it's vindicate. Um, you know. All right. So are there questions from the audience? Because if not, I'm gonna ask a whole lot of them.
Good.
I have a question. I have a
Okay.
question. Sorry, I was trying to unmute. I'm just trying to finish my lunch. Um, so I don't write BDSM, I read it. And but I have noticed and I just kind of wanted y'all's opinions on this. So a lot of the more popular and newer like romantasy and monster romance and all the stuff that's coming out that seems to be honestly geared towards a younger audience. It it's incorporating elements that are dangerous if you don't understand the whole concept of consent. Um, and as an author, again, I don't write it. And I think part of the reason what's holding me back is being worried about the audience and who is going to read this and who's going to think that this is all okay. It's all very normal. So I guess what my question is, do you think some elements are becoming too normalized without the readers understanding the history, the background, what they should be doing to prep for this type of lifestyle, or even a single foray into the lifestyle? What's your opinion on that?
Vita, do you want to go first on that? Should I take that one first?
Sure. No, I'll go first. Like,
Cool.
you know, um, okay. So here it's the hardest thing about being a writer. I cannot police who picks up my books or stories and reads and what they decide to do with that. And so, in a perfect world, we can make everyone read a safety briefing or watch a safety briefing and then go on about it. And that would be like our like at least they know the rules. But every time you get a job, they make you watch a bunch of safety videos and nobody remembers shit about shit. So people are responsible for their own selves. Now, I don't want you to think that I'm not saying that your concerns aren't valid. They're very valid. But I have a hard enough time controlling the 4 people that live in my house. I don't have enough bandwidth to, you know, curate that for other people. Now, I can put out specific content that's like, hey, before y'all try anything in this book, I need you to research, stretch, and hydrate. I can make jokes about it. I can make it accessible to people, but at the end of the day, people are responsible for their own crap.
I
That's
would
just
agree
me.
with, yeah, no, I agree with that. I think, for starters, um, I make content specifically for adults. And that's not to say that these elements are not out there where folks who are not can get into them, but I would not be able to move forward with my life if I did not trust people with the responsibility that I'm given, the responsibility over myself and my body and for the people around me sometimes. Um, so I sort of have to assume that people are uh going to do things responsibly. Are they always going to do that? No. I think that's also going to be a problem no matter what. There's always going to be something that people get into that they're not quite sure about, that they're not really qualified for. Personally, I can say this much. That's one of the reasons I love including so many of these elements into my narratives, is that people can follow it along in a way that's maybe a little bit more realistic. And I think that's one of the benefits that I bring personally as a creator, um, is we are going to get some of that detailed, as we go along. Because I feel like that not only makes um, the listener or the reader more comfortable, it also fills out the scenario a good bit. But aside from that, I think people writing what they know, not, you know, trying to write about things they've got no idea about. Again, there's nothing I can do to stop people from doing that. But then there's also conversations like these. And this is something. This is a something to shape the community a little bit. We're having this conversation about safety and about authors and writers and how we interact. Um, and so in the absence of thought police and things like that, I think this is a great step. And I'm glad you asked about that, Missy.
And then there's one other thing. Like we put out the content that we put out. And I am not comparing us to the cinematic universe, but like there are movies like 50 Shades of Grey, which I know everyone's gonna eye roll. There are movies that are even more eye roll, like 365. There are even funny movies like Eurotrip that does sex clubs in Germany and all this stuff.
Mm,
And anybody can watch those
mm.
and go do whatever. And I'm quite sure that people that work in the ER have tons of stories about people that have tried BDSM stuff and have hurt themselves. So I do try to, anytime I can get people to listen, even on the podcast, I'm like, for the love of God, research whatever you're going to do before you show up with like whatever it is, like, and, you know, do it. So.
No, 100%. And I think also it's tough to be a member of the community because I see that. I see that there is massive public media out there. Um, Aftercare is another good one we're going to get to in a second. Uh, that's it's broadly accessible to the public. 50 Shades of Grey. Well, that comes back on the community. So now we have to defend ourselves and also say, no, wait, here's how it should actually go while trying to get the word out. Will we ever have, good depictions in media? I don't know. I don't know that people care to because it's not interesting. They don't think that audiences will like it. And we know that to not be the case because we include these elements. I see somebody in the chat mention they include these elements in their stories, and it doesn't turn people off at all. Um, there's a lack of knowledge and a lack of desire in a lot of cases. And yeah, that comes back to bite some people on the ass and people get injured over it. I try not to be part of that problem.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you find it difficult to separate when you're writing about pulling in stuff you do in real life to make it more fiction based, or do you just feed off of what you experience?
For the most part, I feed off of what I experience or in my head how I would play through a particular scenario, unless it's something monster based. I have never been a minotaur in a chamber kidnapping a queen. You know, so that would be a very different example. But for the most part, it's I try to make it a fairly realistic progression of things I would either like to do or have done. Did that answer your question, Skylar? Cool.
Let's see, what else do we got? Uh, Fiction is fiction, though. I mean, the same goes with guns or violence. Common sense, though uncommon, must be applied, and that's true.
Yeah.
You know, and
And
at the end of the day, we're artists, we create, and we do the best we can to protect idiots from themselves.
yep. And
But
that's why I call myself an advocate for consent and mental health in these things. Because on top of putting this out, we're also on the other side.
and even in the podcast, like I really try on the podcast, like, and Thula's the foil, right? She's in the podcast and she's asking all these questions. She's like, oh my gosh, I've never even heard of that. And that's the whole point. Like, people are out there like, I've never even heard of that, but breath play sounds really interesting. And it's like,
Yep.
oh, please God, no. You know,
Yep.
like, no, no, no.
And that's a big one. Yeah, choking is always, always a big one. Do your research, folks. I can't teach you a safety class right now, but please, for the love of God.
Could you touch on that a little? Because I do
Choking
know it is pretty hot, and people like to read it or
the physical
the
act
breath play.
of breath play. Breath play for me, that shit's scary, man. Um, it's a tad intimidating. I don't delve into it much in my private life. As far as my content goes, for me, it's a little bit difficult to wind into a narrative. It's not a kink that is super easy to describe, but like anything else that's a muscle, right? I haven't done it much. Um, but in general, yeah, it's very big. And you see, I think I saw a news story. They're like, oh, you know, teenagers are choking each other or whatever. Again, they see it on TV and it's a problem and people get injured. Um, but yeah, crushing a windpipe is not the move. I'm actually more of a fan of other ways of showing dominance or control. I think a thumb under the chin works very well. Asking somebody to hold their breath can be a fantastic substitute because then you've got a little bit of somebody they want to perform for me if it's somebody in a submissive role and they're going to, try to do the thing. But I am not, you know, there are ways to remove some of the risk. It's not one of my favorite things because of the risk.
Yeah. Looking in a story, like, it's not even my favorite in a story. Like, I just, I'm not a degradation kind of girl. Rough sex, sure, but I don't need you to choke the life out of me. I want you to fuck
Mhm.
the life out of me. It's very different. And so, like, I don't know. I just, I feel like people have to be trained. Like, even spanking, you can really jack someone up with spanking if you do not know, like, all the places to hit.
Oh
People
yeah.
just get in there and start wailing on each other. And I'm like, oh, you know,
Yep. Yeah, I spanked him right on the knee with my paddle. Oh, I'm sure that went great. Like it's there are a lot of ways for things to go wrong. And there are so few ways to tell people about how things go right. So again, Skylar, Sunny, Vita, thank you all for putting me on here. Not that I'm wrapping up quite yet, but I appreciate a platform to try to talk about what's right.
now I do have, okay, so asking Kane questions is something we should do. Asking people that are knowledgeable, right? Another thing, and we talked about it on the podcast, is consult a sex worker. Like, find a good one. A lot of them have consult hours. Pay for a consult hour and consult a sex worker. They're experts in the field. You know, um, they would know before Midwestern housewife is going to know.
It looks like someone in the comments would like to chime in.
Oh, uh, go for it.
Can you guys hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Yep.
So, as somebody who has received breath play and given it, the most important thing to pay attention to is where you're doing it, because there are ways where you don't even necessarily have to crush the windpipe or even come near it. So that way they get the sensation of being suffocated, but there's no harm to it. It's the pressure point and the way you do it that makes it to where it can be done safely and never do it over mouth and nose. Yeah, or you can do it over mouth and nose where you do this. So there's ways to do it safely, but you have to make sure that you do a lot of medical research to know where to put your hand or your arm and how to do it to where they can have the sensation but out actually losing full. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Absolutely. Safety first, man. For
Yeah,
sure.
that when yeah, my husband just chimed in using an example is like the what was it?
It's the move from like wrestling, a rear naked choke. Is the easiest.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for chiming in with that. And I'm not trying to hustle everybody up, but I know Kane has a couple more slides, and I really want him to touch on the mental health and erotica because I think that's huge.
Cool. Well, lucky for all of us, I only have one slide after this, and it doesn't have any new information on it. So, mental health in erotica, it has taken on a larger role in the world, and I'm happy to see that's pretty much everywhere. Sometimes we got to put up with the therapy speak that people pull out at meetings or whatever. But for the most part, I am inclined to believe that it's a good thing, that the more we have these conversations, even if some people don't take them particularly seriously, it's still important and it's good representation. To me, what this means is things like characters' motivations, reactions, messages, they can take on a deeper meaning because we're connecting them to something that's not just physical, but something that's relatable to a lot of us. I know I struggle with depression, anxiety, OCD, a few things. Um, and it's taken me a long time to figure out how some of that stuff impacts my life. But now that I have a better understanding of that and have talked to people who go through similar things, I feel like I can use those to make characters in my stories more relatable. And the narratives themselves. We were talking about safe words. That's an incredibly stressful thing to have to do. And there's a lot of mental health elements involved with doing that, particularly if somebody sees it as a risk. If they think their dom's going to be mad if they safe word, that's a whole rabbit hole we could go down. Um, but this also comes with things like aftercare. And that is somewhat a result, I think, of like 50 Shades of Grey and these things, just general BDSM becoming more mainstream, depicted more frequently, maybe. There were concepts like aftercare that did slip out, and you'll see people talking about, I'm not a huge fan of the term, but vanilla, standard relationship. People are married, husband and wife. Oh, you know, suddenly they're talking about aftercare in the sense of, well, what does happen after we have sex? It's not necessarily about um medical care or anything like this. It's just, well, we've done this incredibly intimate thing. What happens afterwards? And in BDSM, that's an entire um there are many, many, many elements we could look at there from how somebody's feeling, how they've reacted physically, mentally, emotionally, all of these things. And so many of these concepts are just exactly the same. If you take random, random couple off the street, they apply just in slightly different ways. So I'm glad to see that a lot more of this is coming in. I saw somebody said they put aftercare in all of their scenarios. Again, with the discussions of consent and things like that to build that narrative, I like to end with, some breathing, reassuring words, depending on what the nature of the scenario is. These are just for all the nonsense and the negativity that having a 50 Shades of Grey does to a community, the fact that maybe that gives us an opportunity to have more of these conversations, not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. I also think that one thing that I've noticed, there's lots of stories about submissives with mental health issues. There's lots of reassurance from the dom to the overthinking sub. I just don't think people talk enough about dom drop or doms that have mental health issues, or most people don't live 24/7 dynamics. They live chunks of time if they're going to do it in real life. Um, and you have to give people permission to be on and off. And so, because this is real life, as much as I would love to live my kinky little fantasies like 24/7, it's not realistic because someone's going to knock on the door and need to find their soccer cleats or whatever, and it really gums up the work. So you have to be realistic. I think if I can't police people, but I can make my stories have enough realism so people learn stuff, but enough fantasy so people enjoy the ride.
I think that's a good point. And I get asked a lot about Dom drop and things like this. It's not something that I have experienced a lot. So when people say they want to see more representation of that and Dom mental health care, Dom drop, it's just sub drop it in the Dom role. It's the come down after something particularly intensive, maybe low feelings. It may feel a little bit, depressed, low energy, um, things like that. People don't know. I mean, we're all human, right? It's the same applies. We go through something big, we come down from it. Generally, I would say that my anxiety and things like that aren't so much around drop or the things that happen afterwards. It's in a scene. If um my hand slips, I spank somewhere I didn't intend to. My heart rate goes up. My anxiety gets up a little bit. I want to make sure that my sub is okay. It's about checking in. And I think a lot of times we talk about submissives with mental health, the story is the solution, sort of. And we hold DOMs to a bit of a different expectation as far as that goes, I think, at least when it comes to an actual scene. I would love to get your thoughts on that, Vita.
Yeah. I mean, we always hear this stuff, right? Like people are like, well, submissives are really the ones in charge because they can turn it off. They can do all this other. And it's like, look, if we're playing baseball, if we're playing basketball, if we're doing whatever, everyone has a fucking job on the court, right? And at the end of the game, people have things that they have to do. They have rituals, they need aftercare, they need this, they need that. Any kind of high intensity activity needs a cool down period. And I
Hmm.
think people just have to be realistic with their doms. I think it's a archetype that gets romanticized so much. Like these guys are supposed to be, or girls are supposed to be with it, and they're supposed to know all this stuff, and they're supposed to do all this stuff, and
We're
it's like,
stoics.
yeah, it's like for fuck's sake, they can have a bad day. And if I want grace as a submissive when I may or may not have a tantrum. And yes, I need correction, but I just need understanding in the whole scenario of it. I need to be understanding if a Dom's like, I do not have the mental capacity for this right now. I'm going to take 30 minutes. I'm going to regroup and I will come back, or however it plays out. But people can have a lot of rejection sensitivity. So they're just like, oh, he hates me. I'm
Hmm.
never going to live again. I'm like, calm the fuck down, people. Calm down. Like he just needs to go regroup.
I think that's one of the big ways that sort of reality and fiction differ. If I lost my train of thought. Vita, what were you saying?
We're just saying that people need to be more, or I was saying people need to be more realistic and have less rejection sensitivity when
Oh
someone
yeah.
has to step away.
And so some of that is communication and understanding that people are not their role first, they're a person. And that's one of the big differences, sorry, that I was going to get to between uh fiction and reality is that when something's on the page, we're expecting them to just sort of they have filled in this bucket of our expectations of our projection. It's not quite so good when we do that with people. You can't really apply the same thing. You know, the author may tell you everything that we know so far about this person, but we don't know everything about the people around us. And so we have to communicate with them. Vito, like you were saying, they're on a like the baseball analogy. We're on a team. And if somebody, you know, everybody knows what part they're supposed to be playing. If you have motivations I don't know about, we can't be a good team. If I've got motivations you don't know about, I'm not being a good team player. And so communication can certainly help with those things. Reassurance, I find, goes a long way. Having those conversations about needing space or whatever it may be, it takes work. I think that's one of those things people say, you know, it takes work, and that's again tough to put into an audio. People don't necessarily want to listen to two folks working through a relationship. They want to working out their pants up, whatever it may be.
Yes. So I appreciate everybody spending the last 45 minutes with us. I'm so sorry, but I'm going to have to wrap this up because we have so much other stuff to do. But thank you, Kane, for coming and giving us this amazing talk. And I know that I appreciate it and everybody else here does too. Um, Next in the Reader's Lounge, we have author R.R. Bourne for an author takeover. After that, we will have the author track panel, narrators, and the reader track panel, ethical non-monogamy. Make sure you take note of the scavenger hunt word from earlier to submit it for another chance to win. Giveaways will start at 5:30 Central, and you must be present to win. Be sure to hop back into the reading lounge to enjoy R.R. Bourne. Make sure when you're leaving the breakout room, you click leave the room and not leave the meeting. Thank you guys for coming. This was amazing.
Thank you guys so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.